Thanks for joining us on the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. How you doing? Real life experience living with an alcoholic, going through a divorce, trying out one of the first online dating sites, and coming out on the other side better than she could have ever imagined, gave Gail Gillis post every word of her book. It is entitled The Journey in Between, a memoir, a life transformed in a Cinderella-like fashion. Now, did you keep a journal while you were going through all this?
So, yes. I loved English in school growing up, and I was going to go into journalism actually before life took a turn. I decided to write the book because, yes, I did keep journals. I wrote a lot of journals over the years, and I started writing the book years after my divorce. And then when the pandemic hit, I just continued and, got out my old journals, and I pulled out the flash drive that had the beginnings of a book on it, and I just started writing. And it was very cathartic for me because my marriage to my first husband, he was a drinker, not fallen down drunk, but I called him a dry drunk. He was very verbally abusive to myself and my older son. And I found writing the book very cathartic. It helped me heal emotionally. So
How did you meet him?
we worked together. He was my boss.
How old were you?
We were very young. Oh gosh, I was like 21.
And you fell in love.
It's hard to say who you decide to hitch your wagon to, In my small town in New Jersey, he was my best option, really. I wanted to get out of my life in a small town, blue collar town, and he was my best option. He had a college education, and I thought, well, he'll make a good father. He'll be good. He's good marriage material. So when he proposed, I said yes. He was kind of nerdy, and I was the little Christian cheerleader that, went through life like, oh, everything's great. It's going to be wonderful. Didn't know a thing about alcoholism. I didn't understand what it meant when someone had drinks and couldn't control themselves. And it wasn't until we moved from the East Coast to Texas that it really got bad. And everything that I did was wrong. I couldn't do anything right. Anything my older son, the abuse started on him when he was younger. Anything my older son did, he just got chastised for relentlessly. He drank a lot of water at the dinner table. And when my husband wasn't traveling, when he was home, every night it became like this huge ordeal where my son would try to drink after he took some gulps of his dinner. And my husband would grab the water out. Don't you drink? I mean, it was just this horrible thing. Years later, we found out he had an esophagus problem. And he wasn't diagnosed until he was in college. And he has to do that dilation thing. But
you stayed married for 14 years. So
yeah, well, it was horrible, but he moved me away from my network of family, friends. After we moved from New Jersey, we went to Maryland, and I saw it kind of starting there. We lived there for 7 or 8 years. He got a really good job in medical sales, started making a ton of money. And he just thought he had this godlike complex. Look at this, I'm making all this money. And I was trying to finish my college education, trying to work, trying to raise my one child because they were 7 years apart.
Oh.
And I just took it. I said, well, I'm going to work or I'm dropping off the kid. And it was hard, but when he would start something, I would just shut down, just be really quiet. If I didn't poke the bear.
What was the final blow?
He left me. Yep. When we got to Texas and he went to work for another job, hired a staff, an assistant. And after about a year, he started talking about his assistant. And I said, why are you talking about her so much? What's going on? And he said, there's nothing going on. There's nothing going on. I said, well, there's a fine line between an employer and an employee. You need to be careful. She's asking you to come over and fix her water heater. in her little trailer that she lived with her 2 small children. Here we had this big house in Colleyville, Texas, with the pool and everything. Of course she was going to go after him. And thank God she did, because the funny thing is, the punchline, he came to me one day and he said, this isn't working. I need space. I need to find myself. I'm going to move out. And I was devastated, Alice. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I don't have a network of friends. He never let me hang out with girlfriends. I was really isolated. He kept me very isolated. And come to find out, he was having an affair with his assistant. But God got him back, because she turned out to be a bipolar alcoholic. But the book is also about Alice. That's maybe like 30% of the book. And then after we divorced, I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I didn't make enough money, yada, yada, yada. But I found my way, and I found this dating site. This was before Match.com, before
Right.
any of this stuff. But AOL had this dating bulletin board you could go on. And I bought my son a computer because he was starting into high school and he needed this thing called a computer. And I was working as a secretary somewhere. And so I bought him this computer, and then a friend of mine at work said, oh, there's this dating app, this new AOL has this bulletin board. So I went on there and I started looking around. I'm hunting and pecking. I got afraid of it. I put it back. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to do this. This freaks me out. A couple days later, I got on again, and I just couldn't do it. Well, in the meantime, I met a pilot, and we started dating. And in the book, it goes through men that I dated, funny things that happened, a couple guys that I worked for that were really inappropriate. It's funny, people that'll read the book will see what some of the men did, and it's like this Me Too movement, like, oh my gosh, that happened to me, whatever.
Right.
Yeah. Rubbing up against you.
Yes.
We were standing at the copy machine. I worked with a guy. He had me come work for him, and he was so inappropriate, Alice. Oh my God, the things he would do to me. I actually had an affair as well. My marriage when I lived in Maryland was so awful. I felt so unloved and so, it was just terrible. And I worked for a law firm, and I'd worked there for maybe a year or so. And I had a connection with one of the attorneys, and he was married and I was married. And, one thing led to another, and we would cry on each other's shoulders. Oh yeah, this happened. Oh, my wife doesn't understand me, kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And within like another 6 months or so, there was really a connection, and we had an affair, and it lasted, I guess, for about a year. But my upbringing as a Christian, and I know this sounds really hokey, I couldn't live with the guilt. I couldn't stand it, even though I had no love when I got home. I had to end it. I had to leave the firm. I had to quit.
Oh.
And I went to work for a telecom company for a man. And within the first week, I knew it wasn't going to work out. He would have these rages. He'd be on a phone call and he'd rip the phone out of the wall and throw it across the room, smash all over the wall. I'd be like, oh, I put up with this at home. I'm not going to put up with this at work.
But you persevered. You persevered. You kept going.
I did. And then I bought a house. I was able, with the help of my parents, when we divorced, my parents helped me, and I was able to buy a home, because my mother said, they didn't have much money either. I called them my little nomads. They traveled all over the country and lived in their fifth wheel. They just loved life. But my father had to have surgery, so they had to put the fifth wheel up, and they lived with me for 6 months. My mother said, living with you is so chaotic. Your kids are coming and going, this and that. Daddy had surgery. He was recuperating. A lot of funny stuff happened when my dad was recuperating, between his physical therapy. My mother, who, depending upon what date was coming to the house, she would put different color lipsticks on. So I knew whether she liked them or she didn't like them. My boys, they were young, they were rambunctious, they were so funny. They pulled things on me that just will make readers laugh. My mother will make people laugh. So the beginning of the story is quite sad, but I think it's something that a lot of people that are in a relationship that They don't want to be there. They want to get out of it. There's life down the road. There's life on the other side of the rainbow. I hope this book will encourage people to think, I've got to find a way to get out of this marriage, whether he cheats on you and you leave, which is what happened to me, or, you find a way to get out. There's life beyond what kind of abuse you may be suffering, whether it's verbal, emotional, or alcohol.
So let me ask you this. How are you telling people about your book?
I do have friends on Facebook, but not that many. I have a couple hundred, and I've put it out there on Facebook. I've put it out on Instagram. The publisher, Fulton Books, has helped me with, doing a little, I don't know what you call it, a little vignette of my book. I've put that out there. But my friends that have read it and people that I know that have read it, some people, there's some sexual scenes in it, so it's not for young teenagers, but it is for mature women. And I think the women that have read it that I know, they all get back to me and say, I loved your book. Oh my gosh, like this happened to me or that happened to me. They associated with it in some way. And there's parts in it that will make you, tear up. There's parts in it that will make you laugh. I dated a pilot who was dating other women at that time that he didn't tell me about. And that's a whole thing, and how that exploded at the end. It has like a really kind of quirky ending, like, haha, look what happened to you. When I met my husband, who I have now, my story is kind of like a Cinderella story in the beginning. Not that I had a wicked stepmother, but I had a wicked husband. And then it morphed into Pretty Woman, where I meet this wonderful man who is very successful with his job. And he lured me away and proposed, and we got married. And he lavishes gifts on me, jewelry, houses, boats, cars. I mean, it's like this whole Pretty Woman thing. And we've been married for 28 years now.
Oh, Gail, I'm so glad. I'm so happy.
Yeah. I love some of the questions that were sent to me about trying to inspire other authors, because I have several people that have said to me, I've always wanted to write a book. I have this in mind. And I say, start. Just sit down and start. You get your first couple of lines written. It flows into a chapter, and it's addicting. I'm on my second book now. It's a historical novel, but historical fiction. But I applaud any author that has it in their head. Get out and just get started.
All right. Gail Gillis posts The Journey in Between, a memoir, a life transformed in a Cinderella-like fashion. Thanks so much, Gail.
Thank you, Alice. I really enjoyed talking with you. I wish you lived next door. We would have a blast.
A retired teacher in Michigan, Jeremy Andrus, has a few choice words for his former coworkers, parents, and the state of education in his book, Why I Quit Teaching to Become a Monorail Driver. Jeremy, are you really a monorail driver?
No, that's that's just tongue in cheek. That's just being silly.
Okay, so how long have you been writing?
Never.
Never?
No, I just, the last few years while I was teaching, I just did it kind of as a pastime or hobby, keep my sanity, that type of stuff. And I'm not a professional by any stretch, but it's on my life's to do. And I was excited to do it and cross that off and see what happens with it. Just 26 years of teaching, seeing the goods, the bads, the highs, the lows, the funny stuff, the sad stuff. Something everybody can relate to. I don't think it's a book that I think teachers will enjoy it, but I also think parents or anybody who's stepped foot in a classroom will be able to enjoy it.
Do we follow a teacher?
No, it's nonfiction. It's just talking. There's not a character. There's not a story. It's just my observations and, talking about the good kids, talking about bad kids, talking about different types of teachers, talking about the problems with education in America, the ways we could fix it, lots of jokes, lots of funny stories, that type of stuff.
What's a standout story?
Um, I guess something that probably resonates would be just the chapter where I talk about different types of teachers. The dinosaur teachers, the hip young teachers, the teachers who want to be everybody's friend, the strict teachers. I take a look at each one of those and then probably have a funny story in regards to each one of those. I talk about the dinosaur teacher, the teacher who is just kind of holding on for retirement. They probably should have retired 10 years ago, but they're still doing it. They're afraid of technology and that type of stuff. And there was one in particular I remember we switched to a new attendance program, and it was so simple. It was a computer program, and I mean, really just clicked a button and your attendance was done. But this older woman who'd been teaching probably for 30, 40 years, she insisted on writing down 30 check marks next to all the students, like she'd been doing for 30 years. And the technology person's like, no, this is what are you doing? This is just press this button and you'll save 10 minutes a day. And she couldn't handle it. And so it was within 2 weeks, she just retired instead of just trying this new computer, because to her, it was crazy. She couldn't handle it.
How about parents? Do you have any stories about parents?
Oh yeah. I tackle all of them, from the helicopter parents to the homeschooled parents. I hit on them a little bit too. Obviously I'm a public school teacher, so I question the idea of homeschooling, because I feel like, you just gotta throw your kids in there and let them socialize and experience life and toughen up. But I talk about kids whose parents are hoarders, for kind of an obscure example. And we just
hoarders.
Yeah, they come from these homes where there's just so much garbage and all those types of things, like you see on A&E, the show Hoarders. Mm-hmm. And these poor kids come to class and they smell like cat urine and things like that. And I go into this whole thing where you never see episode where a hoarder went on to cure cancer or anything like that, and as a result, these poor kids got kind of put behind the 8 ball and that type of thing. So
because nobody wants to sit next to a kid that smells like cat urine, kind of thing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. They struggle, so therefore their kids struggle, and it's just kind of a never-ending cycle. And I talk about how I think the joke, as sad as it sounds, I bring it around with a joke that no one ever said, like, oh, the hoarder cured cancer because they combined, mouse feces and cat urine and something used in adult diapers or whatever. You never have that conversation. They're not going on to do great things for the human race. And there's a lot of that. I'm just picking out. There's a million of these humorous anecdotes in the book.
What's your take on education?
My take on education is it's the cure for all that we have wrong in this country. For example, one thing I criticize is how backwards we have it with the schools that have the least trouble are the ones that typically have the most funding. And I'm very honest. I was a decent teacher, but most of my students at the district that I worked at, they would have been fine with or without me. These were the type of kids who, even if they didn't have great teachers, they had great parents. They had, support at home. They had money. They were very fortunate. Meanwhile, the town over was inner city, mm-hmm. and those kids were struggling, and that school district got the worst teachers. And so that would be, I give a lot of takes as far as how we could improve. And how education should be more funded. But that's a big one where, the teachers that go into some of these struggling districts, those are the ones that deserve the highest pay. Yeah, it should be merit-based for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the big thing I want to get across too. This is not just some typical teacher who's saying, hey, teachers are underpaid, and I'm well aware that the summers off are great and those types of things. But yeah, definitely there's some things that need to be taken. So it's not that whole, I think I do a decent job of not making it that usual teachers feeling sorry for themselves and we should be getting paid more. And, in Korea, the teachers are the most respected. South Korea, the teachers are the most respected people, and here they're the least, that. And there's the name too, by the way. I bring up a story of me in Disney World with the family and kind of thinking, God, I would rather tell people that I drive a monorail at Disney. I mean, that's a cooler job than telling people you're a teacher these days, so I think that's a problem. It's nonfiction and it's humor. So, I mean, I don't get too much into the trying to act like I have all the solutions, but yeah, I mean, I do joke about there should be parenting classes. We as teachers joke that you need a license to go fish, but nobody needs a license to have a kid, and that's that's terrible. There really should be, because there are quite a few people who should not be having kids who are, and they're in my class.
Yeah. So how old were the students you taught?
I had freshmen in high school. I was a U.S. history teacher.
You had to have the patience of a saint. Right?
I liked it. I talk about that too, where I feel, kindergarten teachers probably, as far as a pay scale, should probably get the most, because, they're still wiping butts and that type of stuff. Middle school, I think, is right up there as well, because they are just crazy. Ninth graders, I was okay with, because they were the young ones at the high school, so they were still like, you could intimidate them and get them. I thought that was a good fit, but yeah, you're still dealing with puberty and some of the craziness for sure too. You're right.
So why did you leave?
So I was pension. I bought 5 years when I first got hired. So I mean, I actually was eligible for retirement when I at 25 years. I went one more, and yeah, I was just ready to do something else. And so
yeah,
I do not miss, I miss the kids a little bit, but I don't miss some of the bureaucracy, the staff meetings, and just all the testing that like I was kind of shut my door and let me teach these kids and leave me alone. And that's in the book too. I make fun of the staff meetings and, okay, everybody get up and let's have a trust fall and talk about what, like, oh my God, just get me out of here. I want to, I'd rather go sit with 30, 14-year-olds than be at these meetings with grown adults there. So yeah, I don't miss it. But yeah.
How you telling people about this?
Get on Facebook and Instagram and send it to friends and family and tell them to spread the word. And I'm, going to use some connections to try and spread it. The biggest market for sure would be teachers, and I do envision teachers buying it as a gift for other or even principals, giving it to staff. I think those are avenues I would explore. But
did you go back to the school that you taught at?
Oh yeah, for sure. I will. And yeah, there's been a lot of good feedback from particularly educators. The teachers I've had take a look at it. They laugh their ass off.
I'm sure they do. You're putting a mirror up, man. Going, can you believe we do this?
Yeah. Some of them probably recognize themselves in some of the stories, so that could be troublesome, but oh well. Yes.
Jeremy Andrus, Why I Quit Teaching to Become a Monorail Driver. Thanks so much for talking to me today.
Hey, you have a great day. I appreciate your time.
Carl R. Smith lived a remarkable life. He was an airborne ranger, and then he was the right-hand man for several presidents, beginning with Lyndon Johnson. His experiences serve as the basis for his series entitled Fringe Patriots. His first book, published with Fulton, is entitled Molding Clay. Now, Carl, this is the third book in your series, and you say we don't need to read the other two to appreciate this one.
It's good to read them in succession, but it's not important to do that.
Okay.
I mean, they stand on their own, but if you read book one, you'll probably want to read book two. At least I hope you do. Most people do. It's about the time when I was the president's man. Back in the 60s, I was with President Johnson and President Nixon, President Ford. I was the first ever president's man. There's 6 now. The 6th one is there. 5 of them are from East Tennessee. I'm kind of proud of that. But at any rate, I'm a disabled vet, and I could tell you a lot of things, but if you read my books, you'll know a lot of stuff. But
when you say you were the president's man, what do you mean by that?
Did you ever see the movies The President's Man with Chuck Norris? In 2000, there was a movie called The President's Man with Chuck Norris. And in 2003, there was a movie called The President's Man, A Line in the Sand with Chuck Norris. That's the basis of the books.
Tell me what exactly you did for the president.
What he told me to do.
For instance, give me an example.
Well, I can give you one. The Shah of Iran. You see me carrying him down the steps of his palace when we abdicated him to France at 3 o'clock in the morning. There was a lot of things that we had to do.
All right. So can you just tell me what your book is about?
Well, it's about those things and things that we did. It's about a senator named Eugene McCarthy from Minnesota who became my dearest friend, and a number of people, Tim Seiler, who was a reporter for the Post, a lot of different people that were involved in ways and things that we did to protect them and take care of them. And
it's just funny because I just read Lyndon Johnson's biography.
He passed more legislation than any other president in history. I don't know if you know that or not, but it's true. And when I became the president, I didn't like President Johnson at all. I didn't care for him at all. But when he asked me if I would work for him, and I did, I learned to respect the man. He never wanted to run. He never wanted to be president. I thought he's the one that killed Kennedy, but he didn't. But if you read book 4, you'll find out who did. It's called Liars.
So tell me, in your book, your main character.
The main character is Clay Smith. There's a number of main characters. I mean, there's a Sergeant Shackelford who saved my life a number of times and who beat the hell out of me about 50,000 times, knocked me on my butt a million times because he could until he couldn't anymore. He worked with me a lot. There's an awful lot of people involved, a lot of young ladies. I was at Walter Reed Hospital for 2 years, 5 months, and 28 days. Trying to work that around in your head if you can. To this day, I was there longer than any other patient ever in history. It's a long time. Anyway, a lot of that time I was waiting to get mustered out but when I got mustered out, I was in a wheelchair, and later I was on crutches, and eventually I began to walk again, and I was somewhat of a specimen, but I still am. I work out twice a day, every day.
What happens to Clay Smith?
Well, a lot of things. The beginning of Molding Clay is the end of book 2. The plane went down in the English Channel, and Clay almost drowned. He's not a great swimmer, and there were some extraordinary things that really saved his life, and that's how book Molding Clay begins. The lady that was with him was a terrorist. We didn't know. And she I thought was the reason the plane went down, but it wasn't her. It was a congressman from Delaware and a congressman from Maryland. Very bad people. And I exposed those people, and we took care of them. We executed a number of people. That's the only way you can put it and be honest about it. Bad people. Bad people.
In your synopsis, you say a few real American patriots are pitted against the powerful Washington demagogues who are certain that money and power will ultimately prevail.
Yeah. Well, the colonel that I worked for when I was in the military, I was an airborne ranger.
Okay.
Raised in an orphan's home. Never had much family or anything. And when I went in the military, I just wanted to be the best at something. I wanted to be somebody. So I went through everything that it was possible to go through so that I could gain respect. And that was important to me at the time. Anyway, years later, I had a number of people, including Senator McCarthy, who said, "You really ought to write this down, Carl. I mean, people need to read this. People need to understand what was going on back then during the war and all this stuff. They need to know."
And you've been out talking about it a lot, haven't you?
Yeah, a number of years, sure. I mean, I don't pull any punches. You know, I can prove what I know. I mean, I don't have to hide from it. Lionsgate, I think, is probably going to make a movie of the first two books. At least they're working at it. Chris Pratt, we've been talking to, but...
Well, that's great. From what I'm reading, you've been to more than 50 military bases, Walter Reed Medical Center, Bethesda Naval Hospital, and the Pentagon with your books.
I've signed my books. I've traveled with the USO, entertaining the troops. I've signed books all over the world. And I've signed the books at 73 military bases.
So even though, you know, you had to change the names of the people that you actually, you know, worked with, it sounds like you've written some, you know, a really, you know, fascinating group of books here.
The first two especially are extremely raw. They're very asexual, and no, we don't have orgies and stuff. I don't go there. But I mean, you know, I was at Fort Bragg, and I had this lady come in, and she was a general's wife, and she bought the first book, and I had both of them there at the time, and she left. You know, I'd never met her before, and about 4 hours later, she came back, and she said, "I got to have book two." "Wow, you were in here before." She said, "Yeah, I've been out in the parking lot reading your book." She said, "I couldn't stop." She said, I quote, she said, "I've never been so horny in my life."
From reading your book?
Yeah. She said, "I've never been so horny in my life."
Wow, Carl.
I said, "Ma'am." And I went, she said, "You blushed. You actually blushed." I said, "Well, ma'am, I never had anybody say that to me." Especially a general's wife.
What do you think? What part of the book made her feel that way, do you think?
Well, God. When I got out of the hospital, two young girls, one I call Marilyn Monroe and an extra tall, her name's Susan Weisbach, and Gidget Masterson, who was the daughter of an Air Force general. We traveled from the East Coast to the West Coast together. And we had quite some exploits. And Susan liked girls, and Gidget liked boys. Now, the three of us, never had anything going on. No, we didn't do it. We made a pact that we would not do that, and we didn't. But we aided and abetted each other in certain ways. But when we got out to California, Susan wanted to go to San Francisco. You know, she liked girls, and she felt like that was the place to go. We got to San Francisco, and the police pulled me over and asked me if I was Carl Smith, and I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Well, you need to follow me to the station." I didn't know what was going on, and we did. And he said, "The president wants you to come to D.C. There's a plane waiting for you, and he needs you now." I had no idea what they were talking about. I had no idea what was going on. But that's when it all really started as the president's man.
Carl, this is great stuff, man.
Well, the people that read my books, they you wouldn't believe how dedicated they are. When I had a call from the USO to ask me if I would travel overseas to Landstuhl Hospital, which is the largest military hospital in the world in Germany, I don't know how many books I gave away. But President Bush's wife, she traveled with me at Walter Reed and at Bethesda to give away books. I mean, I must have given away a couple hundred at least. I spent 3 days signing books for kids. It's good reading. It's a little raw, but it's good reading. I don't use a lot of bad language, and I don't use a lot of gumption. I mean, I just tell it like it was, basically.
Okay.
But Gidget was about 5 foot tall, cute as a button, and Susan was almost 6 foot tall and blonde-headed and the most beautiful thing you ever saw. And in book 3, she and I actually get married.
Oh, okay.
I mean, never went anywhere with her that somebody didn't say, God, woman, you're beautiful.
Great. That's awesome, Carl. Carl R. Smith, author of Molding Clay. It's part of the Fringe Patriot series. Thank you, Carl, for talking to me.
God bless you.
You take care. Thank you for your service.
Yes, ma'am.
Dale Roberts lost his 12-year-old son over 4 decades ago, and when he tried to write a book about it, he couldn't find the words. He picked up a book of poetry for inspiration and wound up writing one of his own entitled Poetry That Will Awaken Your Mind, Heart, and Soul. Now, this is one of a number of books you've written over the last 40 years, correct?
This book is number 8. I got number 9 ready to go but I have a few things I have to work out.
Have you published them all through the same publisher?
No, I've tried other publishers and good, bad, and different. I've tried others.
Okay. Are all of your books of poetry?
2 are poetry. Actually, 3 are poetry. 3 are haikus, and 1 is a safety driving book.
Oh, a safety driving book?
Sure, why not?
That's out of left field. All right, so we're talking about poetry that will awaken your mind, heart, and soul.
Yes, ma'am.
How many poems are in this book?
100.
How did you lay out the book?
After I'd written my other poetry books and haikus, I decided to look to see if there's some kind of different type of poetry. So I looked at this type and I started writing it.
What type of poetry is it?
It's called Villanelle.
Villanelle?
Yes, ma'am. And what you do with this is on your first 3 lines, the first line and the third line is repeated again through the poem 3 more times. So each time you repeat that line or before you use that line, you have to come up with something new that you haven't written. So it's kind of tough, but I got it done.
Okay, so I'm reading. It says it's a 19-line poem with 5 3-line stanzas and concludes with a 4-line stanza.
Right.
Interesting. So people like Dylan Thomas, Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, have used this kind of poetry.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So you want to read one to me?
Sure. I got the book right here. The title of this poem is My Grief. My tears of pain are flowing freely. My son was taken from my life. Why hasn't God answered my questions? Days of doubt and guilt now flourish. How did I fail to protect my son? My tears of pain are flowing freely. Will the world ever forgive me? I will ask my son when I see him in heaven. Why hasn't God answered my questions? Now the sun's healing light fails me. Endless nights, the deafening silence and darkness. My tears of pain are flowing freely. Will my daughter ever blame me? How will I answer this unspeakable tragedy? Survive this unspeakable tragedy? Why hasn't God answered my questions? Why do the innocent have to suffer? God's words of love seem hollow. My tears of pain are flowing freely. Why hasn't God answered my questions?
Do you talk about what happened to your son?
No, that's kind of personal. He died. He was not protected by people who were supposed to protect him at the time.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
sorry, Dale.
Thank you. Last October the 18th was the 40-year anniversary of his death.
I am so sorry. So writing has helped you get through that. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
And you write about all kinds of things? Do you write, is this book mostly about your family or?
No, other than my daughter and my son, I don't write about any other parts of my family. I write about everything, whether it be mountains, streams, rain, whatever. God, you name it. Time, life, death.
Yeah.
Pretty versatile.
Are you able to go out and read your poetry anywhere?
I haven't done that. I've been thinking about doing that now that, well, I got one more issue to handle before I do that. But yeah, I've been thinking about that. The next book I got is going to be a tribute to my son. It's called A Father's Never-Ending Grief. And got a picture of him sitting on my lap at my birthday. Last July 30th was the last time that I celebrated my birthday. And then he died a few months later.
I am so sorry. I can't even imagine. I really, really can't.
That's why I was trying to write a book as a tribute to him when I decided to read poetry to punch up my words. And next thing you know, I read the whole book by Edgar Guest, and it happened to be about World War II. And after I read the book, I sat down and started writing poetry.
So now you're finally going to write the book that you set out to write in the first place.
Yep. Oh, it's together. And I got pictures of him and pictures of like one thing I got, and you got a second, I decided to put pictures in the book and then write poetry or expressions after.
Okay.
And I'll read the whole thing correct to you.
This is a poem?
Yes and no. I mean, I didn't even know the Gettysburg Address was a poem till I read and started reading about poetry.
Okay.
Well, here's one that I got a picture of a seashore with sand and one single set of footprints. Below that says, I now walk on God's shores of eternal life alone, without Brian's hand in mine. His footprints have vanished. When will mine disappear?
Dale, that's powerful.
Thank you.
All right.
Comes from the heart.
Yeah, I can hear that. I can hear that. All right. Good stuff, Dale. Dale Roberts,
Thank you.
author of Poetry That Will Awaken Your Mind, Heart, and Soul. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Okay.
Ann Phillips was writing while she was a substitute teacher for 45 years, but it took a very special pet for her to finally publish Puppies for Sale.
I've actually wrote some stories throughout my life, but I never had the nerve to publish them. And so when we had Fiona for 20 years, and she was my daughter's dog. And 10 of those years, of course, my daughter had to grow up and move away to go to college. And I forgot to tell her that she had to come back. So she has started her career in mid-Alabama. And she would come on weekends to visit Fiona. And so we had her for 10 of those years just with us. And when she passed away, of course, my daughter came down, and I was heartbroken. I had never had a dog last 20 years. And it was just part of the grieving process. And I told my husband and daughter, I said, I said, I've got to do something. And I thought, I'm going to write a little story about how we got her. And during the process of when she was growing up with my daughter, I would do all kinds of little imaginative adventures that when she got home from school, my daughter would say, what did y'all do today? And so I told her, I made up a bunch of little stories, and she would laugh. And I thought, well, I might as well start at the beginning of how we got her. And then if the book does okay, I'll move on to the adventures. So all my friends have purchased it, and I have it at one business here in Mobile, and then I have it at my hairstylist. And so I sold some, so I'm thrilled to death, because it was for me, the book was for me as a healing process, and to know that other people have enjoyed it. It makes my heart happy.
Yeah, sure. Tell me about Fiona.
Oh, Lord. She was a little wire-haired terrier, and she was a mess. She was more of a tomboy, which I call tomboy because she loved staying dirty. She loved children. Her hair, because it was a fight to get her trimmed up to make her look pretty, and she didn't like being pretty anyway. She'd rather have dirt all over her. And the stories kind of that we would make up for my daughter was, one of my favorite was, I'd tell her that there were sightings in China of a little dog in the park playing with Fiona, kids playing with Fiona, and then all of a sudden she'd disappear. And Fiona loved babies. She loved children. And anytime babies were around, she'd start licking their toes. She went everywhere my daughter did. Just a sweet, sweet little dog. And my daughter wanted to take her to college with her. And I told Tatey, I said, she's got her little family here with Pumbaa and Lily, and she likes going outside all the time. I said, you can't expect her to stay in a dorm cooped up, and Tatey never walked her on a leash. Fiona was faithfully by her side. And the dorm my daughter first lived in was across the street, and it was the busiest street in a small little town. And I said, Lord, no. I said, you're not going to take her. I said, because if somebody let her out of the dorm, and you would have to teach her how to be on a leash at 10 years old. I said, no. I said, you just have to come home more often. And that was my way to get my daughter home too. She stopped missing her dog. And but she was just a beautiful little dog.
Why is the name of the book Puppies for Sale?
Well, that's how we got her. The book talks about us going to the flea market, and well, I'll tell you, and I haven't told anybody about this. We have a bad habit when someone in our family passes away, we always get a dog.
Really?
Yeah, and I haven't told anybody that. And my daddy had passed away. And so we were out at the flea market, and, we kind of go our own different ways. At that time, you could do that. Your children could wander around safely.
Yeah.
And she came running back to us and saying, Mama, I want you to see this. Come here, come here. And her favorite part was walking down the aisles with all the animals in it. And I said, okay. And sure enough, we walk up to this, booth, and I'm about 3 away from it. And I see Puppies for Sale, $100 or best offer. And I said, no, we cannot get another dog. I said, we had just gotten Pumbaa, who was our Akita that somebody had left tied up to the post at the vet.
Oh.
And I said, we haven't had him for long, and that's just not fair to him. And she said, oh, come on, Mama. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. And so I said, let's go find your daddy. And so we found her daddy. And of course, the first thing out of her mouth is, I want you to come over here. And I said, no, we're not getting a dog. And she said, Mama, please. And I said, Tatey, Well, unbeknownst to me, we were parked right behind that booth. So we had to go to, the booth to get to our car. And Buddy looked at me and I looked at him and I looked at my daughter and I said, hey, I said, how much money do you have? And she said, I got 69 cents. And I'm physically disabled. And I thought, oh Lord, she's never going to go up to this man and offer him her 69 cents. And I said, all right, if you're brave enough to walk up there, you go right ahead. And darn it if she didn't do it. And he looked and he said, what's this all about? And she said, I got 69 cents. And my husband and I are back there just shaking our heads, And he was holding a puppy and he put that puppy back in the cage. And next thing we knew, he pulled out this Fiona and handed her to him. And then my husband and I just looked at each other and we, went up there and he said, well, and she handed him the 69 cents and he handed her Fiona. And I said, oh, mister, why did you do that? And he said, well, he had a cage full of puppies he was trying to get rid of too. He said, y'all looked like y'all were safe people to give her to. And I knew she'd have a good time. And then he handed my daughter back her 69 cents and said, you got to pay for the food.
That's great.
And so that's the book,
And this is a terrier?
She was a mixed wire-haired terrier.
Oh, God, she must have been so cute.
She was. She looks just like the picture in the book when she was a puppy.
Do you think you're going to move on to the adventures of Fiona?
I really want to, and I kind of hate saying this, I would like to see if this would sell, a little bit more than what just my friends.
Well, you are a guest right now on the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, so that's something. And then you can request a copy of this interview, and you can use this interview to send out an email and say, here's me talking about my book. I'd love to come talk to you.
Oh, great. Okay.
Hopefully you can get something going, Mary Ann.
Oh, well, I will definitely will now that you sit here and told me kind of what I need to do.
Okay. You are Mary Ann Phillips, author of Puppies for Sale.
Yes,
Thanks so much.
Oh, well, thank you.
Benton Savage has published several books over the last 25 years. Free and Satisfied is based on a real-life experience, and it's his first book with Fulton. Welcome, Benton. So how'd you make out with your other books?
I published one in 2011, self-published, and then I published another one called Fortune Cookies, which was 100 sayings, like 100 fortune cookies, kind of wisdom sayings, that was published in August of 2024. It actually got to be the #1 best top poetry new seller book on Amazon, which means I did reach #1 for new poetry on Amazon for a couple days.
That's great.
That is quite a little feather in the cap.
You get a little more serious on Free and Satisfied.
Free and Satisfied, I've been working on that since around August 15th of 2020. It took me 4 years to finish that book, mainly because I was focusing on my property management business. I kind of got away from the writing, and now I'm getting back into it. But yeah, it took me a long. That's the longest it's ever taken me to write a book.
What's it about?
I'll tell you how it started. I was traveling, and I stopped in Fort Walton Beach. I was in New Orleans for 3 or 4 months during the pandemic shutdown, the quarantine type of thing. Okay. It was miserable in New Orleans. Luckily, I only signed a 3 or 4 month lease. So I left there, and I was like, God, I'm going to have to go back home to Tennessee and maybe even sleep in my child bedroom. I was 50 years old at the time, roughly. And I stopped in Fort Walton Beach where we had vacationed as a little kid. It was just about halfway between here and home. And I kind of fell for the girl working the front desk at the hotel when I checked in. And I just stayed here. And I ended up writing the book about her About 3 days after I'm checking the hotel, I stayed in the hotel for about 2 weeks, and then I don't even talk to the girl. She doesn't know that I dedicated the book to her. She doesn't even know how much I liked her. And I'm not infatuated with her. I just thought it was an interesting story, and I started it, and that's why it took me 4 years, because the girl was out of the picture. I was like, I need to finish this book. And so she doesn't even know it's dedicated to her. But there's nobody else I could dedicate it to. I couldn't dedicate it to my mom, my sister, or even another girlfriend, because it'd be completely inappropriate.
So Prudy's a real person.
Prudy is a real person. I only knew her for about a week. I met her in Fort Walton Beach at the Quality Inn in Fort Walton Beach. I decided that wasn't nearly romantic enough, so I changed it over to the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, which is more of an ethnic community than Fort Walton Beach. And Peabody Hotel, if you're not familiar with Peabody Hotel, it's very famous in Memphis. They got the Ducks that march every day. They've been on Saturday. They've been on the Tonight Show. They've been in Sports Illustrated. It's a big deal in Memphis, and it's a very old hotel. It's been around since the Civil War. It's been in a couple of places, but it's a very famous hotel in the South. And so I've changed it over there because Quality Inn wanted to cut it. In the literary forms, I made it all set in Memphis. And I'm from Tennessee originally, so I was familiar with Memphis a little bit. I'm from East Tennessee, but I've been to Memphis a few times. And it's an interesting city. And like I said, it's very, it's very biracial. And so I thought it was very appropriate because this is about a biracial relationship in Memphis and the Peabody. It just kind of worked out, that's the way fiction works for me.
Are there issues because you're a biracial couple?
Well, it never goes anywhere because in the book, in the book and in real life, in the book, he ends up smoking in the Peabody. He's young. He's only 19 years old. He's an idiot, so to speak. And he smokes in the Peabody and gets kicked out of the Peabody and is not allowed to come back. So he loses touch with the girl for a couple months. And then he stays in Memphis and hopes that they reconnect. And long story short, they do reconnect at the end. But it's not really a couple thing. That biracial thing is really between those two people rather than the outside culture. They're not really a couple to really experience that.
So what's the gist of this book?
Well, a lot of it deals with impulsivity, alcoholism, and he impulsively runs away from home, and that's how he ends up in Memphis. His father died when he was a senior in high school. He flunks out of college. He's living at home with his mother. He's like, this isn't going to work out. Nothing's going to happen to be good. So he just kind of takes off and he hitchhikes across, really with no ending in sight, just knowing that he was not going to live with his mother the rest of his life. He had to go somewhere. He hitchhikes, ends up in Memphis, and then he meets Prudy. And then the book starts. The book, he ends up working in real estate for a little while, and then he gets back into restaurants where his original goal is. And he ends up working in a restaurant and writing, and then he meets Prudy again. And then Prudy comes back into his life. What's the real point of the story? It deals with impulsivity and alcoholism, I would say it's the overall themes, but it also deals with a biracial relationship. But it's a coming-of-age story is what it is.
All right. You are Benton Savage, author of Free and Satisfied. Thank you.
Yes, Free and Satisfied, and Wrong Side Out is coming out is right out right now. Those two books are my focus right now.